Welcome to 2024. I scrapped a video essay. PC music is dead, and hyperpop has become so referential and subversive that individual albums sound like experimental insert genre here rather than a part of a coherent hyperpop canon. That's not a bad thing, but the new Underscores is experimental pop punk. The new Jane Remover is experimental shoegaze. And Sophie will never not be dead. Wait. This isn't an essay about the death of hyperpop. I have more relevant things to write about at the moment. This is an essay about Barber Westchester, an animated movie about what it's like to live in your 20s. If you're watching this video, you should watch Barber Westchester first for two reasons. One, this is a critical text that looks at a piece of art and discusses my standpoint to the work and my perspective of it, which then colors the interpretation of the art as a whole. You should watch the movie first and come up with your own perspective, with your own standpoint, but it's a weird movie, so you can come back here and maybe I can help ground some stuff. Yeah, watch the movie first, because two, Barber Westchester is free right here on youtube.com. Go watch it. I think it's here. It's fun. It's really good. I like it a lot. I'll be here. You can pause me. You can X out the tab. You can go outside. That'd be really cool. Go outside. Go outside. Go outside. I've just been told I should not tell you to go outside yet because I still have things to say. But seriously, go watch Barber Westchester if you haven't already. I'll be here. About a month ago, while feeling a bit sick, I watched Lily Alexander's Transition Regret in the Fascism of Endings, and she spoke about life after the conclusion of a self-narrative along with a strange animated movie called Barber Westchester. A few weeks ago, while still feeling a bit sick, I watched Barber Westchester, and the film's creator, Joni Phillips, perfectly articulated a whole lot of things that I've been feeling in the last couple of months, this weird, gross, wet cement portion of my early 20s. And so I watched Barber Westchester again and again and again, and then I started writing about it. Barber Westchester opens up with two scenes. The first is of a plane slowly flying across the sky with Barber monologuing about their relationship to some god, and the second is the first time we see Barber, alone on a floating mast with this creature floating behind them, but still taking up both Barber's and the audience's attention. This is a microcosm for the movie's plot, but maybe also adding that monologue back in would help strengthen my point. Whenever I hear the drone of an approaching airplane, my first instinct is that she is returning. In that moment, I believe she's cracking open the sky. It's the bellowing of her entrance through the troposphere. It's the screaming horde of giants she keeps under her thumb, on their way to punish me and everyone I care about. Like a horrifying Rolodex, the times I've disobeyed her endless set of rules flash before my eyes in quick succession. But just as certain as the panic, the airplane reveals itself and continues to fly overhead. And I forget. I go back to my life as usual. Until next time. Barber Westchester is a movie about interruption and routine and where we go from there. The plot of the movie begins when Barber proclaims that God is dead. Well, Dakaya, the god that their cult family worships. And then they move to a new home with a new job at NASA because they're going to study space, which is totally real. I promise. Space is totally real in this movie. It's real. Dakaya's fake. Space is real. On their way to their new life, Barber loses their arm, which isn't really relevant beyond the fact that that would be really scary if your arm fell off. But anyways, Barber enters their first day at NASA looking for work that feels real, tangible, with purpose. On day 2, their boss informs them that space isn't real. Their work at NASA has no purpose. It will never have purpose. Barber has fundamentally lost direction, and because of their NDA, they can't effectively share the specifics of their aimlessness. The plot of the movie, which Barber nor the audience can really define until the end of the movie, is focused on this grappling of the narrative and deciding if it can provide a purpose and truth that makes our lives worth living. Or maybe we can find purpose without a narrative. That'd be pretty chill. That'd be pretty cool, snazzy. This is a point from Lily's video, straight from Joni's mouth. Okay, so space isn't real. Barber has fundamentally left behind their family and their god. So what's next? What's left? Barber doesn't know, so they started seeking advice from others in pretty vague ways as they work to find a new direction to head in life. When Barber tells their roommate Silver about a secret they're keeping, but they feel kind of guilty about, she tells them a story about a horrible friend she had, and a secret she kept for him that ultimately harmed her. Silver ends the story saying that instance, that secret doesn't really matter anymore, and that life does get better. But it's hard for Barber to see that now. And a weird demon/manifestation of Barber's current anxiety starts to make their job and life even more difficult than they currently are. Oh my god, a new demon. What? A new demon just dropped. It's horrible. In fact, this demon screws up this guy, and Barber is about to quit their job at NASA when Mayor Wisconsin puts them in touch with Mayor Gerard Ladlesmith and their parasite Jared.
Oh, what the fuck? Who's this little twerp?
Gerard invites Barber over for dinner, and then Barber visits him and meets his husband, Benny, a man who truly, truly, truly loves his job. Barber doesn't ask for job advice, though. Barber asks for advice on how to deal with the demon/manifestation of Barber's current anxieties, and Benny still talks about his job in this instance of sabotage that almost caused ruin, but didn't because Benny's amazing. Gerard speaks next and moves the conversation towards his relationship with Jared, sharing with Barber how he learned to live with suffering over time through love and community. So, things get better with time, things get better with community and love, but Barber's life is still shit right now. At this low point, Barber tells Margaret, a mole and another friend, the truth about NASA. And while Barber expects the same sort of shock that they had when they learned the truth about space, Margaret just asks,
"What space?"
Margaret goes on to problematize Barber's insistence of a higher purpose, a god, a space when it seems like they are using these higher purposes, these narratives for their life, to avoid acknowledging any of their current problems. Things will get better with time and love and community, but you also have to work at it. Barber realizes Margaret is right, and they buy a ticket to home. I moved away from home back in August. Home is pretty different now. I lived in dorm rooms for the past 4 years, partly for a job, partly because there was a lot of slumlords back in my college town. Anyways, dorm rooms aren't homes. Even though I say I moved away from home this year and home is different now, the town I grew up in didn't stay the same for 4 years and then suddenly changed when I left for a job in August. There's this instance where the town I grew up in suddenly becomes a thing I remember instead of a place that I live. I know substantially fewer people there than I used to, and it's changed so much over the past 4 years. My friends all graduated. We all left. They built a new roundabout. They built a new fire station. When we come back, it's as visitors. We don't always come back. Barber doesn't find their family back at home. They find the town they grew up in overrun by parrots, and they call their mom. Their family moved to New Hampshire, so Barber gets on the next flight, gets a little scared by the sounds of a plane, and finally makes it to their family. Barber isn't good with connecting at them and doesn't understand a word their father says, but they took a step to address their life on Earth rather than distract themselves with the stars. The trip to New Hampshire? It's a start. Barber heads back to their new home in Mountainia, and Silver promptly shows them a news clip. The town they grew up in is completely gone, so now Barber is occupying this space again with barely any purpose. Their visit didn't offer them any clarity or closure or direction. Barber still has all these family problems and this shitty job and this weird little demon that won't get off their back, but Silver made them a drawing. There are people that love and care for Barber. There are people worth living for. There are people worth being for. There are people worth continuing for. Barber heads to NASA and quits their job and shows the possibility of freedom to the other NASA workers who quickly and quietly return to the comfort of their monotony. But there are still those demons on that island in their mind, worries of the past and future, and there's no hope in escaping those demons until Barber jumps off the island, swims to a black cliff, climbs out of the shell of their former self. Barber's life isn't perfect at the end of the movie, and they explicitly tell us their anxieties are still there, but Barber is working on them, moving on. They throw away their shell in the bag they used to move to their new home, and they grow more content in their uncertainty and freedom. That's the whole thing with Barber Westchester, isn't it? Possibility is scary. That's where all the confusion and absurdity of the film comes from. That's where all the confusion and absurdity of your early 20s comes from. But Joni took the absurd and lent it the gravity it always requires to actually mean something. And they made this. And it's brilliant. And I scrapped a video essay. So that's the incomplete story of Barber Westchester, from Barber's perspective. Now here's an incomplete story from mine. I listened to Rick Rubin talk about Johnny Cash on NPR last night while driving to the grocery store. I think about the essay I scrapped. I think about everything that I've made that I've decided to delete or throw away. I worry that maybe my writing doesn't mean anything. You can tell a robot to write now, can't you? So why write anything at all? It'll be shit on the first pass and take a lot of editing and buffering to get somewhere halfway decent, and then you'd better share it. But then others would actually see it, and then it can actually tangibly be bad. It can't be bad if you don't write it, and it can't be bad if you don't share it. That's how December gets sometimes. Another year gone. What have you been doing? Nothing that matters. Well, that's not true. I've been doing better. You've been doing better. I know I'm doing better because I feel better, even though everything around me feels, in a word, failing. I'm handling it though, calling the mechanic, calling the doctors, listening politely as the doctor informs me for the second time that the specialist gave me the wrong instructions, but they'll make sure everything gets sorted out. The doctor takes my pulse, checks my lungs, sends me off to the lab for a monthly blood sample. The lab looks at the results, calls me a few days later, and I adjust my medication. We don't think about each other until the next time I walk through those doors. We carry on. I'm doing better, but every night I get home and decide whether or not to do the dishes. Sometimes I don't because there aren't that many, and sometimes I don't because there are too many. Sometimes I think about how good it would feel just to do the dishes, but other times I think about high school English. In senior literature, we had an absurdist unit where we read Camus' The Stranger and The Myth of Sisyphus. Both works are known and advocate for a sense of joy and certainty no matter how dire an existence may be. Camus imagines Sisyphus rolling his boulder up the mountain over and over again, completing his own special perpetual punishment in hell as happy, because he knew what had passed and he knew what was coming. Sisyphus had certainty. In his work, informed by 2 world wars, Camus concluded life is a meaningless thing that we make meaning from, and death is only a concern if you make it one. He lived a happy life until, at the age of 46, he died in a car crash. He died healthy. He wrote healthy. He managed the dishes. Today, as I was noting when I need to return to the clinic just before calling the mechanic, I thought for a second about how my car and I are always slowly depreciating, how we rely on each other to keep running. I stopped thinking about it when I realized that idea wasn't very helpful nor true, how my body was more resilient than my car. I think about how I would own many more cars in my life if I continued to live in the sprawled out towns and cities that make up most of rhubarb country. If I could, I'd stop owning a car though. I'd stop going to the doctor so frequently. I'd pay someone else to do my dishes. And so I don't imagine Sisyphus as happy, but accepting, content in his work. If the gods had said his punishment was over, I don't believe he'd stay, even if the sense of freedom would be so entirely overwhelming at first. Barber left NASA. I left home. For a couple of weeks after moving away from home, I cried more days than I didn't, a natural response. For a few weeks, I couldn't spend too much time at department stores because I'd get overstimulated pretty quickly. Sometimes I'd have to go to one for work, and I'd always go in the mornings while it was still somewhat quiet, a list inside a clenched white knuckle, a race against panic. But I went to the store yesterday, listening to NPR on the way there, Rick Rubin, and I knew Sisyphus could be happy once he was done with the boulder. You can make your own rules in freedom. It can make freedom easier. The grocery store was easy. Maybe that's what Camus meant when he said Sisyphus was happy. Okay, maybe the reason I love Barber Westchester is because about a year ago, my arm fell off. Well, not really, but my body failed me in a pretty strange and deeply profound way. And then I graduated college, and then I got a job, and then I just had to keep going down a road I didn't really think I'd be on.
Space isn't real!
I spent a week in the hospital after my arm fell off, and I walked around the hallways in those grippy socks they give you in hospitals. There was a lot of what could only be described as hotel art on the walls, and I remember telling my dad they should put up a photograph of the physical impossibility of death in the mind of someone living. That shark encased in glass and formaldehyde by Damien Hirst. I wanted something to remind us that death is still impossible while we are still here, that death only has meaning when it is present, when we make it present. Something so frightening separated from us only by glass, so we may ponder over it and make meaning from it, a work of art that doesn't begin and end at its viewing. Maybe I love Barber Westchester so much because I've been thinking a lot about those Camus pieces. Both works, of course, are rooted in absurdism, but they also have a stark finality to them, a luxury that I, nor Barber, nor most people can afford. Sisyphus will roll his boulder up the hill forever, and one must imagine him as happy, for he always knows what the future will hold, with no doubt, no conflict with any other ancient beings. It will only and always be suffering if he allows it. The narrator of The Stranger, on the other hand, he dies, and yes, I know we all die, but it is so much harder to continue living in a world that continues to move and change when home and purpose and health are not fixed, where things continue to happen, where you must continue to grow and heal, where there will be new fears and anxieties in the same breaths as new loves and joys, but the experience is worth it. And doing things is worth it, and writing is worth it, and honesty is worth it, and living is worth it, and optimism is worth it, and being is worth it, and 2024 is worth it, and failure is worth it, and frustration is worth it, and the dishes are worth it. I watched Barber Westchester and I listened to Rick Rubin on NPR, and I think I should really just finish this essay. It will be done, and I will allow it to be bad because I'm not writing this essay to be good. Not really. I'm not washing the dishes to be the best dishwasher. And there are more essays to write and more things to do and more dishes to wash. And this slow epiphany starts to seep into me like cement. It just keeps going, doesn't it? At the end of the movie, when Barber is truly free of everything with very little certainty in their life, with so much possibility, one must imagine Barber content. One must imagine Barber at peace. One must imagine Barber happy. One must imagine the same for me.